So this would be part 2, interviewing Jack Dowling at Westbeth, January 30th?
30th, yes.
2013.
Right.
So you were saying we're picking up at the San Remo Cafe.
Right.
Judith Malina used to hang out there.
They would hang out, but not the way other people hung out. They had their booth.
Mm-hmm.
And they would only sit in the booth. They did not stand on the floor. It was kind of divided into booth people and standing people.
Mm-hmm.
The people who stood around liked to be able to mix around in the crowd because they knew everybody in each one of the circles. The booth people liked to be there to have people come up to them.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an almost empirical kind of situation at times. So Judith Malina and her partner again,
Julian Beck.
Julian Beck, of course. They had their booth that they would be in, and people would come up and talk to them, but they did not get up and move around.
What was the mixture of the crowd? I mean, because it was both straight and gay at the San Remo.
It was straight and gay. There were a number of straight painters in there. I don't think anybody with the same kind of names that were going on over at the Cedar Bar.
Mm-hmm.
But serious people. There were a number of women who were straight. There was a group of women called the Mother Truckers, and they were a moving company, and they were apparently the wives of painters, and they helped support their husbands by moving stuff. There were also, the wonderfully curious thing was, there were also left over from before, let's say the gay, literary, artistic crowd discovered the San Remo. There was the local Italian guys that would come in there for their late night drinks, and they still came. Mm-hmm. So I have a sketchbook that fills, with everybody in it. Another person who was in there all the time. She was in that film. I'm gonna have to come back to her because it just went blank.
That Maya Deren.
No. She was a big woman. She sang. She was the German film.
She was in
Shirley,
Seven Beauties.
Seven Beauties.
I read a little thing about her.
Yeah, Shirley.
Gigantic actress.
Yeah, but at that time she wasn't. At that time, it was long before the films. She had a big contralto voice, and there were some period of time like Mancini had classical music on the jukebox, and she would sing. Sitting at the bar, all of a sudden this voice would come out, and it was Shirley Stoller. Stoller was her last name. She was also a lot of fun. And then all of a sudden, the next thing we knew, she was in. Before she did Seven Beauties, she did that movie about the nurse and her boyfriend who were. I don't remember the name of it. It was pretty well known at the time. The Killer Nurse or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I can find it pretty easily. Yeah. But there was like a really interesting social scene. Like there was sort of like what we were discussing at lunch, sort of a pickup where you might become friends with the person for the rest of your life. Could you sort of?
For a good part of my life, most of my friends, my long-term friends, the friendships developed out of the San Remo, more even than out of my classes at Cooper Union. Mm-hmm. I had one or two long-term friends from there, but mostly out of the San Remo. We kind of experienced the same things together and observed the same things together, gossiped about the same things together, watched people like Leonard Bernstein try to come in, and David Diamond outside telling him he's not to go in that bar, and he would go in anyway.
Who is David Diamond?
David Diamond.
Who?
Diamond, isn't it David Diamond?
I don't know.
Composer.
Oh, the composer.
Yeah.
Was it because that Bernstein was married and he shouldn't go in, or he
Just
shouldn't drink?
He should not get around that Bernstein was in a gay bar. Uh-huh. Although everybody knew that he was active in the gay world, but not publicly.
Well, he used to be seen at the Everard. That's what I heard.
I never saw him there.
But that's what I heard, that he could sort of disappear in the.
Well, there were a lot of people you could find at the Everards. I mean, there were a lot of movie stars sometimes that show up at the Everards because it was a completely anonymous place. And if you said, well, I saw so-and-so at the Everard Bars Everard Baths the other night, it was a lot different from saying I saw them, at the San Remo, where it was very public and different. The baths were certainly public, but all you had on was a towel, so it was different.
And both Everard and San Remo were probably mob owned, do you think?
No, San Remo was not at all. San Remo was owned by the Italian family that had run it way, way back.
The Santinis, right?
Yeah. And when, I think it was Joe Santini died, his wife, Betty, took it over. And she ran it just as it had been. She didn't change much of anything except she kind of shortchanged you on the cheese for your spaghetti. But that was the only change I saw. She didn't have the bowl of spaghetti, the bowl of cheese on the table anymore. She took that off, and the guy would spoon it on.
How was the food at the San Remo?
It was okay, traditional American Italian kind of menu, not like you would have in an Italian restaurant today. It's that Americanized Italian food.
With there was also, San Remo had some issues with race.
Oh yeah.
You told me an interesting story about young gay men who are black being sort of made to wait on line, or
on a Saturday night, there could be a line out front. Now, if you were a regular, like I actually became, because I went there also during the week after school, and that would be my first stop on the way home. If you went around there, let's say Saturday night, there was a line outside, and particularly black boys, you were ushered right in. They had somebody at the door inside, and the young blacks would be told they were too full, and they'd have to wait till they had occupancy thing changed, and yet I could walk right in, or friends of mine could walk right in without any problem at all. And it was very discomforting to find yourself being passed. At the same time, you wanted to be in there, so you didn't get to the end of the line. You just went up to the front and went in.
What were the bartenders like at the San Remo?
They were all straight. They were all mostly Italian or Irish. They were all very tolerant of what was going on. They knew exactly what was going on. I don't think any one of them were homophobic.
They could be rather tough, I heard.
They could be tough. They were certainly tough with another...
With drunks,
With drunks, yeah. They would issue drugs. They would usher drunks out of there pretty fast, and they were really good at leaping over the bar. They didn't bother going all the way around the coffee machine. They'd just jump over the bar and out you went. There was another fellow there who was famous for taking out his dick and laying it on the table for everybody to admire.
Mitchell, right?
Yeah.
John Mitchell or Jerry Mitchell?
Bob Mitchell.
Bob Mitchell.
Yeah, and he would be ushered out the door, and then he would come in the other door.
With his penis back in his pants.
Folded away.
Zipped up. For now.
He did have something impressive to look at. So.
Somebody told me that he would, or maybe you told me that he would push the jukebox with his penis too.
That I didn't see.
I would have paid money to see that.
Right.
Can you tell me a bit about, you had this beautiful story you told me once about New York at night, the smells of the village. Like in terms of bakeries and trash cans.
Way over here in the west side at Horatio Street and Hudson. And of course the bars were over around 8th Street, McDougal Street. It was the Jericho on 6th Avenue, which was also a place we would go. Kettle of Fish, Minetta's. We'd hit all the bars. I mean, the San Remo was the core. That was where everybody went. But we'd drop in the other bars, which usually had a few gay people in them, but not intensely. But there might be somebody you knew that went to, let's say, the Jericho, who you'd go in and talk to, and then you'd go to the San Remo. Then walking home at 3 o'clock in the morning or so, there must have been at least 3 bakeries in the Far West Village. And so at 3:30, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, there was all this odor of baking bread. just intoxicating. One of the buildings was on 4th Street, which is now advertised as a townhouse, but it was an old bakery. Another is on the corner of Jane and Greenwich Street. That was a bakery. And there was another one tucked in here somewhere. But I would just wind my way home with all this odor of baking bread, or rolls, whatever, and it caused me to sing, so I would sing.
But it was also New York. I think you said once it was a dirtier town in terms of like smell back then. Like that. I don't know if the streets weren't cleaned as much, or.
Well, the city wasn't as crowded as it is today.
Yeah.
As it is today. There's no question about that. I mean, if you were out late at night, almost anywhere there weren't many people around. If I drove my car uptown at 2 or 3 in the morning, Zippo right through. There was no traffic on 6th Avenue, let's say. I had this 1932 Packard Roadster, in which I would drive to school. I'd be able to park it outside of Cooper Union. Then I'd drive over to San Remo. I could park it right outside outside. And when the bar closed, get in and drive anywhere I wanted. The city was like it must have been pre-war. I don't think much had happened. Nothing had architecturally had happened. Things were run down. The subways were in terrible condition.
Mm-hmm.
Everything made, you had the great smells from the bakery, but then you had the terrible smells from the buses, from taxi cabs, the automobiles, garbage left out. There were garbage cans at that time, not the way they do it today. So there were cans all over town, and the lids were off of those. And you're always smelling garbage somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and dog poop everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only recently. I mean, that lasted for a long time, even into the 70s.
The pooper scooper law didn't come in until the early 70s.
Right.
I remember that. It really made the Upper West Side a lot nicer.
The village too.
Yeah.
And then gradually the city began to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, particularly when they changed the buses.
What was you told me you sort of lived in the Irish ghetto, right? Like sort of Hudson Street was like longshoreman families.
I don't think people realize this today, and I don't mean general New Yorkers who've been here a long time, but let's say new people, that this whole section of the West Village was an Irish.
You can talk